นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. When people come to the monastery and put food in the monks' bowls on Bindabata, this is a practice that goes on every day if you've never been here. There's always somebody who, as they're putting food in the monk's bowl, either says out loud or thinks, may I be rich. Very popular aspiration, unfortunately, for Buddhists, because you can't help thinking they're going to get disappointed. Because the idea of getting rich, you're never rich enough, are you? Because it's coming from craving, desire, and craving desire doesn't stop even if you make your first million or your first billion. It's never going to stop unless you realize that it's the cause of suffering. Nevertheless, it's kind of understandable. Everyone wants more money to be wealthy because we associate that with happiness, comfort, freedom, being able to do what you want, when you want, etc. But of course, the Buddha didn't encourage or praise that way of thinking. There's certainly nothing wrong with just making sure you've got the basic necessities of life, and if someone doesn't have enough to eat or a place to live, well, yeah, they're in trouble. So the Buddha also encouraged us to help those who really don't have enough. But I think most of us these days do have enough, certainly enough to practice the Dhamma. But the Buddha really emphasized inner wealth, what we often call spiritual wealth, the Arya Sapa, which is those qualities that are essential for practicing the Buddhist path. You might say essential for ultimate realization of the Four Noble Truths, freeing our mind from stress, suffering, not only in this life, but for the future as well. And one of the things we often say is that the internal wealth, the spiritual wealth we develop through the practice, is better than ordinary material wealth because you take it with you when you die. Goes with you into your next life, whereas money and property and possessions don't. You have to leave them behind, so they're not as good, are they? If you have to leave something behind, better to focus on what you take with you. So internal wealth, spiritual wealth, has got to be better. But the trouble is you can't see it, you certainly can't post it online and impress your friends. So it's hard to boast about it or whatever, because the whole point is spiritual wealth is helping you to let go of your attachment to the idea of self, which is the cause of suffering. So it's something that's invisible, internal, and yet essential and very powerful. Something to be really brought up and developed in your life. And perhaps that's why we say the most powerful quality of the spiritual wealth in the sort of various lists that the Buddha gave about what is spiritual wealth. The most powerful one is saddha, faith, confidence in the Buddha. Because it's the starting point for everything. You wouldn't invest your time in listening to a talk or practicing meditation, or making offerings of alms perhaps, if you had no faith. To do anything towards the goal of nibbana, ending suffering, you've got to have some faith to motivate you and start you off. To listen to the Dhamma, you have to have some faith first. You wouldn't, if you're just doing it out of curiosity, but no real faith, you might listen to a little bit of Dhamma or read a Dhamma book, but then you move on to something else very quickly. But true faith leads on to action, skillful action, and so it is an essential quality to have and to develop and to maintain. You have to look after it. Like all these Dhamma qualities that we encourage you to develop, like mindfulness and insight and patience and effort, whatever aspect of the path and the practice you're looking at, you not only do you have to develop it, but you also have to look after it, preserve it. If you have some faith, preserve it. And that means sometimes you have to keep revisiting why you have faith in the Buddha and his teachings, listening to the Dhamma to restore your faith or deepen your faith. And then, of course, the most important of all is practice. Put the teachings into practice, put effort into that, because the strongest faith comes from learning and experiencing the fruits of your practice. If you practice meditation and experience some peace, your mindfulness improves even just once, that really tends to stick with you for a long time. Again, you want to preserve it and repeat it and increase it, of course, but even just once can have a profound impact on your mind, on your life as well. And may just remind you, what the Buddha was talking about is true. There is something such as inner peace, inner happiness. And the riches of the world, are only so good because this inner peace is disconnected from them. It's not really related to them at all. And yet you can have it. Even without the riches of the world, you can still have inner peace, as the Buddha himself showed. And that's how the Buddha lived. He left the wealth and comfort of his former life to live as an ascetic in the forest. And yet he was very happy. We may even say the happiest person in the world. But if you just have one brief moment of something special, something a bit different in your meditation, it really boosts your faith. It's not the only thing that will boost your faith, but it's a very important experience. And I think most people can, at least sometimes, get through all the obstacles and their troubles and distractions and experience some inner calm and peace. Of course, there are many levels or depths to the peace of the mind that comes through meditation. But they all have one or two things in common. Some factors of the mind that is peaceful are always present. So like, even if you just have a brief moment of peace in your meditation, it could be just literally 1 minute where your mind goes a bit more still, calm than usual. That's really the same stillness as the most profound states of samadhi, what we call jhana, appana samadhi. It's obviously brief, momentary perhaps. The technical word we often give is khanika samadhi, where your mind just gathers together, your mental energy gathers together inwards, and the 5 hindrances disappear, at least for a short while. And that's different than normal, where your mind, as we all know, is wandering around all over the place and very prey to moods and disturbances, and it's easily agitated. at least for a moment, that goes away and the mind gathers together in one place, accompanied by some feelings of peace. You feel at least something different than normal. Gives you more confidence, more contentment, sometimes a relief, sense of relief, and spurs you on and gives you energy to carry on. And the idea is that, even if you only experience that occasionally or just once, it gives you some motivation to keep practicing. So that's the kind of thing that can really boost your faith, your saddha, and make it an inequality that is really, like we say, a source of wealth, a source of inner riches. Because it then becomes faith, saddha, based on what you've done. You've been peaceful at least once, and no one can, dispute that or convince you otherwise, or with difficulty. And the kind of inner wealth that the Buddha was talking about, whether it is saddha, faith, confidence, or any of the other qualities, these are qualities that. One of the things the Buddha said about them is that other people can't take them away. They can't steal them from you. They can't be damaged by fire or flooding or all those kind of things that can physically harm us. Because they are these inner qualities that really are kind of almost like indestructible when they're truly there. Obviously there has to be true faith and some true wisdom and true generosity. These qualities of inner wealth, usually they're listed like faith and hiriotapa, so like sense of shame, fear of wrongdoing. These are considered inner wealth. Sutta is like wisdom. Maybe wisdom gained first of all just by learning, studying, hearing Dhamma, but over time it can morph, develop into true wisdom, true insight into the Four Noble Truths. But that's an inner wealth that travels with you, goes with you, can't be taken away by wind and rain and fire and all those things. Chaka is another one. Chaka is just basic generosity and ability to sacrifice, to let go through the practice of generosity. Very much the opposite of that desire for worldly wealth, to get rich. If you're still stuck on that, then you tend to be less generous. If you're really stuck on it, really obsessed with it, and you're unlikely to try and meditate or anything like that, you'll think it's too much of a waste of time because you've got to go on and earn your money. So jhaka is a really important, profound quality, and it's a spiritual wealth inside. Sometimes sounds a bit like a contradiction, doesn't it? You have the intention to give up, give away, to share, but that's considered wealth. It doesn't at first make sense, but you have to think about it, because if you have chaka, you have the wish to give up, give away, share, you obviously have enough peace of mind and enough contentment and inner happiness that you can do that. When you're very insecure or afraid or very attached to the self, so selfish, then your chaka, your sense of sharing and giving fades away. It disappears when your mind is overcome by greed, selfishness and so on. So these are examples of inner wealth, but the faith, saddha, is the most important, because that really is what will bring you back to practice the Dhamma, listen to the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma over and over again. Not just for one day, but for 1 year or one lifetime or even many lifetimes. And so when you practice meditation as well, you have enough faith that you try and learn meditation and practice it, however difficult it may seem, if that can boost your faith, then also meditation is going to really have a profound impact on your life. Not only will it give you memories, reminders of what it's like to be peaceful, separated from the normal distracted states of mind, the more normal stresses of life, but gives you an insight into what you have to do, what you did, what you had to do to attain, to experience that. It will remind you, you need to give time to meditation, you need to put effort in, you need to be mindful, bring up mindfulness, preserve your mindfulness. You need to counter the obstacles, you need to have different qualities that you bring up to counter the obstacles, the hindrances to meditation. But you can do it, because if you've experienced some peace, I've done that before. I did it, if only briefly. So faith leads on to effort, which leads on to results. Of course, we tend to jump straight to the results, so that can be a problem, and we're always thinking, when am I going to be peaceful again? Especially if you've been peaceful before, just occasionally, you're always thinking, when is it going to happen again? And that can be a big suffering for the meditator. But you can't deny it. If you've been peaceful once, the mind gathered together, was more settled on its meditation object, not distracted, not worried, not angry, not sleepy, you don't tend to forget that. So it really spurs you on to keep practicing. But it shouldn't be like the person who was gambling, and they had one win, and then they spend the rest of their life gambling away all their money, and then hoping for that one next win, or to get back to that win. You just keep coming back to creating the good causes, and don't focus too much on the results, because that can be very disappointing, and then the disappointment leads you to give up, not want to do it, or look for more short-term forms of pleasure, back to the world again, because that really is often our big weakness. Is that I'd rather enjoy this little bit of pleasure now than invest effort in training my mind in meditation, because the pleasures, the happiness of meditation is something that may take time and effort, and we often go for what's easier, what we can grab quickly, the nice meal, the thing to look at on your phone, the activity, even activities that involve a bit of effort. Often they seem more attractive than practicing meditation. So we have to keep reminding ourselves, and we keep having to come back to our faith. Why we practice, the value of the practice, because it informs us, it gives us values, gives us a goal, but also gives you things to look for, pointers to look for in your practice. So you start to notice, maybe when you value a peaceful mind, because maybe you've experienced a bit before, you start to notice things that support a peaceful mind, ways of behavior, people, places, activities that actually support the practice of meditation. And similarly, you also notice what really doesn't support meditation. Obviously some people we know, they're probably very not interested in meditation or have no understanding of it, so they're hardly going to encourage you. So you just have to know that. You don't have to make enemies of them, but you just have to accept this person doesn't know much about meditation, so maybe they're not the best person to talk to just before I'm going to meditate or something like that. Maybe in the beginning of your practice, as you practice longer and more, well, it doesn't matter so much. You know what you have to do to look after your own mind. But there's places and activities to avoid if you're practicing meditation. That's why on a meditation retreat things become very simple. We don't talk much. there's not much in the way of entertainment or distraction, because entertainments, distractions, conversations and so on can be very distracting. It stands to reason, but that's why. So we have to learn what supports meditation, what obstructs it. And as you meditate more often, you'll notice that. You'll notice there are times in your day maybe when your mind is quite peaceful. Something I realized when I began meditating for the first period of my life that I was meditating, there are actually moments in the day when you're not particularly stressed, worried, angry, desiring anything much. Your mind is relatively peaceful. It's just we don't even notice. There are times when your body is not giving you much grief, it's not much pain or discomfort in your body. It feels relatively normal. Times when the world around you is not distracting or stressful. There are those moments, but often we don't miss them. We don't see them. We miss them because we pick up so much on what is stressful and agitating, annoying and difficult and brings us pain. That's what we notice more. The peaceful parts of our life, the peaceful parts of our mind, the peaceful experiences we have from time to time through our day, we miss. But as you practice more, you start noticing that, I think. And with that you maybe appreciate more simple activities that are maybe not that stimulating but actually can bring you a sense of peace, contentment, or you can more easily practice mindfulness as you're doing those activities. Or you might just notice there are times when your mind is fairly content and happy in itself. And that experience actually increases the more you meditate, because the more you pay attention to your body and mind over and over again, you notice things. You get to know yourself. As I was saying earlier in the meditation, you practice mindfulness of breathing or mindfulness directed to any aspect of the body, you get to know your body, and not just the physical form, but the sensations, the feelings associated or rising out of having a human body. You notice them, and you notice how they affect you more. And that's a vital learning process as you're kind of waking up to the truth, which is the point of the practice. You're waking up to the truth, getting to know the truth of why we suffer, where it comes from. A large part of our suffering just begins with the human body that constantly has aches and pains and feels too hot, too cold, and is hungry and tired and this and that. This is constantly affecting us. And so a lot of the time we don't even notice. But as you practice more mindfulness directed to the body, you do notice. And you notice how moods are affected by what information the body is sending up in terms of feeling. And then you may learn more about the relationship between your state of mind and the body, and what's going on with your body and how it affects your mind, and even how your mind affects the body. Most of our time, as I said earlier, we're always seeking short-term hits, short-term pleasures to distract us from ourselves, really, our moods, our thoughts, our feelings, the way the body is. Rather than practicing mindfulness, we tend to go for short-term pleasure. So you'll notice that as you're practicing more, the mind that wants to whisk away and maybe just think about something, fantasize about something, or rather than meditate, get up and go and do something that seems more pleasurable, more attractive. So we have to learn how to be with the body and mind more, but that's where you learn. You learn how thoughts come and go, and you don't necessarily have to follow them. Feelings arise, pass away, you don't have to follow them. You know them and they come up. So it's not like you're escaping, but you're not indulging them. You're not holding on to them or identifying so strongly with them. And this is the skill of the meditator. And the moments of peace that you have in your meditation will help there. Because when you're peaceful, you know, oh, I can drop things, let things go, be at ease in myself. So you get confidence from those moments of peace, and that feeds back into, as you're going through life and you're experiencing different emotions, mental states, gives you a confidence to be mindful and see that you don't have to follow every thought, every desire. Maybe there's a higher happiness to be experienced, or the happiness that just comes from knowledge, from knowing things the way they are, rather than just being a slave or being prey to every mood or every feeling that comes out of the body and just reacting to them always. Your mind starts to experience a more satisfying experience of the mind that is aware but detached and therefore peaceful. And you can't stop thoughts and memories popping up. You can't stop the body having different sensations of pleasure and pain. This is all the karma of being a human being, and because we made karma in the past, we're constantly experiencing the fruits of that over and over again. But the whole point is we're now making the good karma, the skillful karma of practicing the Dhamma. That's our good fortune. If you have faith in the Buddha, you have that good fortune. So now you can use the eye of Dhamma, the eye of wisdom, to deal with pleasure and pain, distractions, aversion, desire, boredom, all the different mental states that affect us. You can use the eye of wisdom on them. And these peaceful states of mind that come as you practice more meditation will help that. They help the mind to calm down and see the way things are. In terms of results, well, it may not necessarily be lots of blissful feelings and really radiant states, or seeing heaven and hell and seeing special things. But you may notice other kinds of results from this. So like, say Ajahn Chah, I often quote it, when he started his monastery, he noticed the first sort of results coming from people who came to listen to his Dhamma talks, learn meditation regularly, is that they suffered less when their relatives died. So when he first went to start his monastery, the people in the village, when they lost someone, and in that part of the world, death was quite common through illness, old age, but illness and accident. People would be wailing all night long for many nights when they lost a loved one through their sadness, their grief. Wailing loudly, sometimes uncontrollably, as human beings do. This is not a judgment on human beings, but that's just what they do when they're really caught up in their attachment and they lose somebody they love. But he noticed over time people did that less. They were still sad when they lost their loved ones, but because the power of their practice of mindfulness, listening to the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma, they started to experience or show much more self-control, more calm, more able to deal with some of the normal stresses of human existence, such as the death of a loved one. And the same with illness, when they face their own difficult illnesses that involved a lot of pain, and quite often they have very little in the way of drugs and painkillers to deal with the illness in that part of the world. He noticed people were doing better than before. He said, this is a result. So often the results that you do experience from learning to calm your mind, learning to reflect on the Dhamma, listening to Dhamma, learning to be aware of feelings and how they affect the mind, not identifying with them so strongly, not identifying with thoughts so strongly as self, as me, mine, myself. The results come out in these sort of situations, when you face illness, when you lose a loved one, when something goes wrong. You have certain qualities that help you to deal with it better. and you display less suffering. And Ajahn Chah was kind of monitoring that or noticing that over the years at his monastery. Another thing that he noticed, and many other people noticed as well, is that over years of practice, people do gain, if they're sincere in their practice, they do gain this strong faith, this inner faith, confidence in the Dhamma. They can rely on the Buddha's teachings more and more. And that's kind of more and more a part of who they are. You know, you could say it's an attachment, and you could say, well, yeah, it's still an attachment, you know, and it probably is to start with at least, but it's a useful attachment, a skillful one, and it brings good results. And so you have a problem in your life because you've been peaceful before in your meditation, you've understood some Dhamma before in your meditation, you've seen impermanence, you've seen that you don't have to identify or grasp so tightly with the causes of suffering. Maybe you've seen that a few times. Then when you do experience suffering again, you know what you have to do, and you know you can let go of it and overcome it. So you get this confidence based on the teachings, and you're willing to turn to the Dhamma when you have problems. Turn to the Buddha in terms of the qualities of the Buddha, turn to the Dhamma in terms of qualities of the Dhamma, turn to the Sangha, but in terms of qualities of the Sangha. You know, as unenlightened beings, we tend to relate to individual people. So if you have teachers, often that can be Sangha. We do tend to attach to them, and that can be a useful thing, certainly in the beginning, but we do have to be careful because teachers are also practicing, so sometimes they can let us down. But the qualities that make someone into a Sangha, a noble one, that's really what we're following and emulating. And over the years, as the faith comes up, then that's what you move towards and aspire to more and more. The qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, that's where your faith resides, and that stays with you. And they say it even stays with you into your next life. You know, why do people who haven't become enlightened in this life, haven't reached Nibbana this life, why do they come back and get a chance to practice in future lives? Well, because they've developed strong faith, this inner wealth of faith that goes with them. Better than money. What did the Buddha say? Is it like a tree? You keep following the Buddha and his teachings, you keep trying to apply that in your life in whatever way you can. You keep meditating, you keep doing the different practices, listening to the teachings. He said this is like a wind blowing a tree every day. You know, the tree growing in the field, there'll be one direction that the wind comes from every day or most days. We call it the prevailing wind. And so the tree will tend to lean because of that. It gets hit by the wind more from one side than another, so it will tend to lean in one direction because of that. And the Buddha said that's like you listening to the Dhamma over and over again, respecting the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma over and over again. Your mind inclines towards Dhamma. It has faith, easily has faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. And so when you die, like the tree will fall down in the direction that it's leaning, your mind will fall in the direction of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, meaning coming back to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha again in the future life. But just in this life, you know, does your mind fall towards the Dhamma when you face problems and suffering, or do you still go for those short-term fixes, the hit, the distraction, the comfort food, the drink, the drugs, the entertainments, the this, the that, whatever it is that you find gives you temporary relief from your suffering? You know, be wary of that habit because it becomes a very ingrained habit. And try and develop the good habit, the new good habit of inclining towards the Dhamma. You have a problem, okay, we all have problems. Where can the Dhamma help you? how does it fit into the teachings of the Dhamma? Say, in the Noble Eightfold Path, how do you need to practice? Do you need to develop more mindfulness? Usually yes. Do you need to develop the effort to abandon unwholesome states of mind, cultivate wholesome states of mind? Yes. Do you need to develop right action? Keep your precepts, right speech? Yes. Cultivate more right view, listen to more Dhamma. All of these factors are where your mind can incline towards when you're facing suffering and problems. Mixing with Kalyana Mitta, seeking out teachers and Dhamma friends who practice well, to get good examples from them, to get support and encouragement from them. And putting effort into the practice, reflecting on suffering, its causes, which have to be abandoned, and observing the cessation of suffering more. In those moments when your mind does put aside its problems and experiences some peace, if only temporary cessation, that gives you confidence that you can let go of suffering when you experience a temporary end of suffering. So inclining more towards the Dhamma tends to be like this. You tend to think about Dhamma more. You seek out the Dhamma as a solution to your problem rather than always just going back to the world, or more like just back to distraction. Cultivating patience, endurance and patience to be with your problems so that you can fix it using the Dhamma. So many areas of Dhamma practice we're cultivating, and you learn all of these when you meditate. And you may notice that if you analyze or pull apart your mind, the mind when it is peaceful in your meditation, when you have a peaceful meditation, a peaceful state of mind, what's happening? What's there? What qualities are present? And there's the effort to bring up mindfulness, the effort to sustain and preserve mindfulness. There's some joy, some contentment. Obviously there's faith. There's probably some wisdom there functioning, helping you to clear away hindrances, the more negative states of mind, the doubts, the worries. So really appreciate that when you're peaceful, what has led up to that, and what does a peaceful mind, what kind of qualities does it contain? And that will give you reminders and clues for the future, how to do it again, which is what we want. What are the dangers? What are the ways to overcome the dangers? These are the areas we're learning, and we learn first from the teachers, from the words of the Buddha and the teachers, but then there's no way around it. You also have to learn through your own experience what works. And sometimes even different things work, don't they, at different times. Like we might have a main meditation object, such as the breath, to develop mindfulness every day, perhaps doing that, at least for a period of time. But then sometimes we introduce other meditations and reflections to help, the perception of impermanence and perception of death. Loving kindness meditation, particularly to deal with anguish and hatred. And many other meditations, if we're having a lot of lust, then meditation on the body, the perception of the unattractiveness of the body, and so on. These are things we also have to introduce into our meditation. There might be like tools that we pick up and get better at as you go along in your practice of meditation. You learn how to use these tools wisely over time, when to apply them, how to apply them, when they're needed, recognizing when there's a need, recognizing when you don't need them particularly. So gradually you become more skillful in it, and you get better at it, and you know what you have to do in different situations to keep your mind peaceful, or to prevent the 5 hindrances coming in and stirring you up. So it's a constant learning process. I don't think anyone would ever say, "Oh, you know it all, end of story, finish." Even if you feel you're enlightened already, probably no one here is, but even if you felt that, well, you've still got maybe the chance to help other people, and you have to learn how to help other people and teach them effectively. That's still a learning process, isn't it? So just the ability to learn, the interest to learn, developing your wisdom faculty, or what we call sutta, the study and learning of the Dhamma, this is always going to be something that's like a source of wealth to you. If you cut that off and you say, I know already, I'm enlightened already, or I don't need anything more, I know what I need to know, I know best, if you get lost in your conceit maybe, then you're losing some of your wealth. So the Buddha encouraged us to develop this inner wealth, much more valuable to you, for your life, for success in your life, for ultimately for freeing yourself from suffering, and much more useful. So maybe I'll just leave you with these reflections tonight, and afterwards, if anyone has any questions, we can discuss them, and I'll try and give you some answers.